I will introduce Suzanne first, and then Reem, before you go, I will introduce you. Welcome to the DMICE conference. This is the Internship Bonanza. Two of my interns that work with me this summer are presenting, so I'll introduce them both. I'm David Dorr, and I supervise the Care Management Plus team, as well as am the Chief Research Information Officer here at Oregon Health and Science University. Our first speaker is going to be Suzanne Navarro, who we were pleased to work with actually for a second year. Last year, she was going into her senior year at Jesuit, and this year she's going to be a freshman at Vanderbilt University. And she worked on our eCare plan app last summer, and then as well, she worked on another of our applications, Coach. She's interested in medicine and data science, molecular and cellular biology and data science. I said medicine. Suzanne, do you want to get started?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dorr, for the introduction. So I just wanted to let you guys all know, first of all, good morning. And I'm probably going to need to shut off my video just because I'm actually in Nashville right now and the Wi-Fi isn't super good where I'm at. So just so you know, I will get sharing in just a sec. Could someone let me know if they can see my screen?
It looks great. I can see it.
Perfect. Thank you, Lynn. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Suzanne Navarro, and as Dr. Dorr said, I'm a rising freshman at Vanderbilt, but I'm from Portland, Oregon. And today I'm going to be presenting on the research projects that I worked on this past summer, the eCare Plan app for patients with multiple chronic conditions, and Coach. So this is kind of going to be the layout for my presentation today. So I'm going to start off with eCare Plan background, and then what I did last summer, and then this summer, and then just a little bit about Coach. So almost 1 in 3 adults in America are currently affected by multiple chronic conditions, or MCCs for short. MCCs disproportionately affect women, racial and ethnic minorities, and low-income individuals. Patients with multiple conditions usually see multiple providers to help with each of their conditions, as we know. And a lack of care coordination amongst a patient's providers all too frequently results in wasted time and money. This is supported by the purple portions of Figure 13, which shows that people with chronic conditions make up for a disproportionate amount of healthcare spending. And lack of care coordination, most importantly, results in lower quality care and worse patient health outcomes, as evidenced by the disproportionately larger readmittance rate for MCC patients in Figure 14. So EHR, or electronic health record systems, such as Epic and MyChart, have become widely implemented in recent years in various healthcare settings. And while existing health IT or health information technology interventions like EHR systems have greatly improved care coordination among providers and have greatly improved the clarity and accessibility of medical data for non-MCC patients, they have had limited success improving MCC patient care. So the goal of the project is to improve the quality of care for MCC patients, particularly those with chronic kidney disease, or CKD, by tailoring health IT to their unique needs. The proposed solution for reaching this goal was to build the eCare app, an app which will work in existing EHR workflows, serves as a tool for both providers and patients that contains the patient's comprehensive care plan and all of their medical information in one place, enhances patient understanding of their medical data, and emphasizes patient goals to providers. So there were many collaborating institutions involved in this project. On the left, there is a summary of the collaborators and their roles. FHIR or fast healthcare interoperability resources, was also integral to this project, as it standardizes data formats and interactions so that EHR code can be used on a variety of platforms without having to be rewritten. FHIR is part of what makes this project innovative, populating the eCare app with data from Epic. The bottom right picture shows the FHIR workflow. And so I'm going to begin by going into some of the stuff from last summer. So first, both provider and patient-facing versions of the eCare Plan app were built. So this is the health status evaluation and outcomes page of the app in the provider-facing app on the left, and then on your right is going to be the corresponding page in the patient-facing app. And so there was a lot of preparation that had to be done for usability testing of the app once it was created. So this included designing a simulation patient dubbed Patricia Noel to be the archetypal patient that would have this app as part of her care. She has MCC, advanced CKD, and multiple care teams across healthcare settings. The team created 3 different medical scenarios that kind of followed like a progression in her care in order to test all aspects of the app. In addition, because of her set medical conditions and medical data, when she is used to test the app, the team can immediately know if the eCare plan isn't displaying everything that it should. And so here's a screenshot of Patricia's scenarios on this slide, complete with medications, referrals, and more. And a user acceptance testing form was created as well to guide usability testing, as it contains all the questions that facilitators for usability testing ask participants in order to get their feedback. So usability testing was pretty much done in OHSU, so it wasn't sourced out to other collaborators. And so the UAT questions were crafted with the intent of making UAT as structured and efficient as possible. So here is a screenshot of a portion of the form. And so for collecting data or collecting provider and patient feedback during usability testing, I made a data collection form in Smartsheet, and it made collecting and interpreting the feedback extremely efficient. And here's a little picture of a portion of it. And one more thing that was done as preparation for usability testing was making training materials for those learning to use the app. So this included tip sheets, training sessions, and training slides. So on the top, there's going to be, on the top of this slide, there's going to be a picture of part of a tip sheet, and there's some guiding instructions and arrows on it with pictures of the app. And below it is going to be a training slide from the deck used in training sessions that essentially tells providers what to expect during UAT. And UAT was conducted and involved getting provider feedback over the course of an hour on matters such as functionality, usability, and how helpful the app would be for patient care. UAT helps us see how easy the app is to use for those who don't have as much experience with it, as well as how helpful the app would be for patients with MCC. This usability testing was conducted in the app's test and live environments. So the provider-facing test and live environments can be accessed through Epic POC and Epic Prod or Production, respectively. And the patient-facing test environment is accessed through MyChart POC. Both test environments are populated with Patricia Noel's medical data, while Epic Production contains real patient data. And the real patients whose data was chosen for usability testing had to meet certain inclusion criteria. So preferably that they were like the participating provider's patient, so that the provider could tell us if something wasn't showing up on the app that should have been, and that they had MCC, at least one of which was CKD. And so here are some pictures of the provider-facing app. And this is the care team section. And findings. So the app was found by participating providers to be very intuitive to navigate and to use. They thought it would allow for more efficient and effective reviews of patient data and goals before visits. And particularly, they pointed out the diagnoses, labs and vitals, and goals focus areas as their favorites and most useful in doing this. And overall, providers agreed that the app would add substantial value to patient care. However, last summer we found that there were a few problems within the app. So additional labs weren't showing for patients with more medical data than the app was used to. And medications were slow to load for some of the patients with more data. And goals were also usually missing from live patients. And furthermore, a lot of the, well, a sizable amount of the providers said that they wish they could have they could see comments from other providers in order to get additional details that were not already recorded in the app. So for instance, if patients were forgetting to take their medications, that would be something that they would want to know about in the app. And so these are the pages that they particularly liked, as I referenced before. And so the providers specifically liked pages 1 and 4 because of their consolidation of key data while still keeping that necessary specificity that we want in managing someone's healthcare. And they also thought that the goals section under page 2 was very helpful and innovative because that's not something that you would see in other EHR systems like Epic. And resulting changes. So based on the first round of UAT, some changes were made. The hour-long blocks of time for UAT were shortened to 30 minutes for the sake of efficiency, and the UAT and Smartsheet forms were shortened accordingly. Also, a video walkthrough of the app to account for app downtimes was created. And the additional labs issue for live patients was fixed pretty shortly after the rounds of usability testing. And this took going through the app's logs in order to track down where the errors were occurring and what exactly they were, and testing in Epic POC and production to ensure that things had been properly fixed. And so this little portion of an Excel spreadsheet is kind of something I put together last summer where inconsistencies between the app and Epic were compiled. And there was also a Word document with screenshots and notes on these problems that helped with debugging the app. And a lot of the problems that were found relating to data missing from the app were due to problems with Fire rather than the app, as Fire is still a relatively new tool. And so, yeah, this is pretty much just a portion of that Excel spreadsheet minus the medical record numbers, of course. And since summer of 21, so we had done a bunch of provider testing, just like I said, but now we had patients trying out the eCare Plan app. So we had initially planned to have providers that had been already selected and had accepted to be part of the project to train patients on how to use the patient-facing app, but it ended up being our usability testing facilitator that helped train them and then conducted UAT with them. And so they most commonly reported that the patient app wasn't sufficiently different from the MyChart that they already used. So basically the provider-facing application was pretty good, just a few little bugs to be fixed, but it was new and it was extra helpful, but the patient-facing app still needed some work. Summer 22. So I'm going to get into what we've been doing with the patient-facing app in a sec, but this summer involved me working on like the usability methods paper with RTI. So I wrote some background paragraphs on a few usability tools. And in eCare Plan, we had primarily been using the system usability scale, but so in this paper, we were trying to branch out and see what other things there were and how useful that would be to eCare Plan. So I first started out with researching Health IT Usability Evaluation Model, or Health IT UEM, and then the System Usability Scale, and Nielsen's Usability Heuristics. And I read through many study abstracts in order to compare these testing tools and including these comparisons in these background paragraphs. And so this will probably become a joint RTI and OHSU blog post about the eCare Plan usability testing. So just a little bit of background for those of you who may not know a ton about these tools, because some of them are relatively new. The Health IT UEM was developed as a combination of multiple usability models in order to address the gaps in implementing the individual models. So the 9 components of Health IT UEM are error prevention, completeness, memorability, information needs, flexibility and customizability, learnability, performance speed, competency, and a catch-all of other outcomes. And the system usability scale is essentially a 10-point questionnaire that is answered by test participants in order to gauge the app's usability. Each question has 5 answer options, ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And these qualitative answers can be converted into quantitative scores out of 100. Which just makes them a little bit easier to parse. And especially when comparing studies, it's a lot easier to see, to compare like the efficacy of certain apps and stuff. And Nielsen's Usability Heuristics, a usability testing framework that is not specific to healthcare, consists of 10 components for assessing the usability of a given digital interface. These are the 10. So I will just give you all a moment to read through them. And so basically, some of this research was done just to see a little bit more about what's out there and compare it to what we did on eCare Plan with the system usability scale. And we might possibly consider using a blend of more than just system usability scale for usability testing, done in version 2.0 of the eCare Plan app, which is just about starting pretty much this week, actually. And so here's some initial comparisons between the tools as shown in same colored highlights. And then using this, I was able to create a few paragraphs comparing and contrasting the tools. And reading some articles about software quality and testing also helped me with writing these paragraphs. So that was super useful. And I'm very glad that that was included as part of the internship through Michelle. And I also helped make a graph to count the number of notes patients had at OHSU and other big health providers in the area, in the Portland metro area, in order to find the average number of notes from OHSU, the percentage of notes from OHSU, and the percentage of notes from these other providers. And going through the patient notes also helps determine which patients may be good candidates for the eCare Plan app. So with version 2.0 starting just about now, that could be very useful. And eCare Plan version 2.0. So like I said, it is pretty centered on changing the patient app based on input from last summer's usability testing. And this process is pretty much just kicking off this week. And as promised, just a little bit about Coach. So I tested the Coach app, which was pretty similar to testing the eCare Plan app. So I was able to use a lot of the skills that I learned last year and continued improving this year in Coach, which was great. And this testing involved using real patients and a testing framework that Michelle, one of the team members on the eCare Plan app, created. And a super brief background on Coach. It's a clinical decision support tool for people with high blood pressure. And just a little update on how Coach is going. So after the testing, we were able to determine that everything is working pretty well. And the average response time for recommendations. So recommendations are basically like what the system gives you as a patient based on your high blood pressure readings and your medications. And so these recommendations, the response time was decreasing overall with the patients that were tested. So I think there were about 20 patients that were tested. And the only real issue that we found is that 2 patients had a hypertension diagnosis in Epic, but in Coach, the recommendations were saying that they didn't have a diagnosis. So that it was great that the recommendations were telling us that they didn't have that, so that we knew that something wasn't working properly. But this was found to be a problem with CQF ruler. I could not do it justice if I tried to explain what CQF ruler is, but basically it's something that has to work with the app. And so it ended up just being like a problem with a newer version of the app. And so that we were using at the time that we were testing these 2 problematic patients. And so more functional versions of the app have, in that they work better with CQF ruler, have been made since. And so here is a snapshot of the homepage of the app and of the framework questions that were part of like a longer Excel spreadsheet. And here are a few citations from the figures that I had earlier, and a little bit on health IT, and then usability tools that I had to research. And so as I conclude my presentation, I would like to give a special thanks to Dr. Dorr, to Michelle, the rest of the eCare and CMP teams, and to DMICE for all helping make this internship experience what it was. And I think this concludes my presentation for today. Are there any questions?
We've got a little bit of time for questions. Thank you, Suzanne. It was a delight to have you, albeit very virtually this year.
Thank you, Dr. Dorr. It was great being on the team again.
Anybody have any questions? You can type them into the chat or just speak up. Okay, well, maybe we'll go on to the next presentation. Thanks again, Suzanne. It was really enjoyed hearing the overview of usability testing, and the improvements that you made will be used for the next versions. So thanks again. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Rheem Saleh, who was our other one of our 3 interns actually this year. Reem, are you on? There she is. So Reem recently, oops, I had your intro already, sorry. recently graduated from the honors program at Portland State University with a BS in data science, minor in math, and is interested in going on to a master's in data science. So very passionate about data science within healthcare. She worked with us on a project that, due to the government being very slow, really didn't fully get started. It was our Bridge to AI project, which she will talk about and tell you about. But we were very grateful to have her to sort of think through how we might get started and some of the major issues. So I think it was such a pleasure. And she did attend virtually again the Aim Ahead project's first series of webinars, which is focused on inequity, basically making AI more equitable. And so I will leave it to you, Reem.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Dorr. I'm going to try and get my screen shared. Hopefully you guys can see like my presentation title.
Looks great. I can see it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, thank you for the introduction. So yeah, my name is Rheem Saleh. I'm one of the interns for the DMICE department, working under Dr. Dorr. My presentation today will be about artificial intelligence biases and trust within healthcare. So just an overview real quick, just a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to give a rough background on AI and then the Bridge to AI project. What is AI specifically? The purpose of even looking at like the issues within AI, the biases, and the purpose of having the Bridge to AI project. The mission of Bridge to AI, and then something I worked on, and then finally key takeaways from the internship, and then just from all of the things that I did research on and learned throughout the internship. So a little bit about me, kind of, Dr. Dorr already mentioned this. I'm a recent grad of the PSU's Honors College with a BS in Data Science, minor in Math, continuing to pursue Masters in Data Science, and then coming into this internship, I had experience coding in R, Python, and SQL, which I gained throughout my 2 years at Portland State. So, like Dr. Dorr mentioned, the project I was initially brought on for was the Bridge to Artificial Intelligence project, the Bridge to AI project, which specifically with OHSU, we would be working on the educational and outreach aspect of working with AI in healthcare. However, this project's funding kept getting pushed back, and I wasn't able to contribute as much as was expected. But although that happened, I was able to focus on the biases that arise when working with AI and attended a symposium and some workshops to learn more about these concerns. Along with this, I was able to help work on writing an abstract for the Pacific Symposium on Biocomputing 2, which will also be focused on more on the ethical aspects, which we're working on with other people for the Bridge to AI program. So let me just say a little bit about the reason I had even joined this project in the first place is because AI is such a fascinating tool that can be used to our advantage, and it has so many applications to it. It's continuously growing and has so much potential to help with different fields, but especially within healthcare. But when we work with this type of technology and the data that comes with working with it, it's important to be aware and consider the issues that can arise. And a huge part of these issues are the biases that can come when working with AI. And then also trying to get trust of people is hard, especially because of the way AI has been depicted in movies over the years as these sort of scary robots that can take over if we let them, or can somehow take over its algorithms and coding and whatnot, and kind of run around on its own. So these are all just things to consider when working with AI, and especially when applying it in a healthcare setting where there's other people's information being utilized, and it's important to protect what is given to us safely. So I want to start by actually defining what AI is so that we're all on the same page and have a stronger understanding of what it actually is. It's a term we've probably been hearing a lot about, and I personally have been hearing it more and more in the field of data science and all of its applications and oh wow, how much it can do. A formal definition from Oracle is that it's systems or machines that mimic human intelligence to perform tasks and can iteratively improve themselves based on the information they collect. So essentially, we're building these systems that are able to make conclusions on their own based off of information that we provide for them. So it's stuff we give to them. And this said, there's different types of artificial intelligence like neural networks, robotics, machine learning, and a couple more. Machine learning is specifically what Bridge to AI will be utilizing to help aid in decisions healthcare providers make in their work because of its like massive computational abilities, specifically with voice data, which I'll be getting a little more into. There's also so many different applications like within social media, education, healthcare, robotics, finance, automobiles, agriculture, and so much more. Those are just a couple I've listed. Specifically with the Bridge to AI, it'll be focusing on voice data, and potentially it can help determine what type of disorder someone may have based off of their voice data that we collect. So for example, we can have voice data from patients that have disorders and those that don't have disorders to aid in this process. So more specifically, our voice has many different components to it, and we can look at the waveforms our voice produces and the different components that create sound and see if there's any irregularities that occur in certain people with disorders and then compare it to people without to help aid in this process. So however, this requires a lot of time and thought put into it, even to ensure that the model can even be reliable. And another thing to consider when working with healthcare and patient information is the biases that arise when working with this type of technology. So what even is bias? There's a lot of definitions out there going around, but there's these two main aspects that I want to kind of highlight and think of on a very broad scale. There's two different ones. The statistical concept, which are essentially the systematic errors that the model actually makes, but then there's also the social and ethical concepts, which are the prejudices that is prevalent in society today. So I did mention a little bit about the biases that can arise when we create a model, and this may be because of the data that the model is using itself can be biased and skewed to a certain category. So for example, let's say we have more data on people from European descent than those of African, Latino or Latina or Asian descent, and it's not balanced towards the entire population. It's skewed towards the European. So from this stage, the model may be biased and make inaccurate decisions for someone who is Asian because there's only accurate data and enough data for Europeans. However, biases don't only arise in the data and the stuff that's put into the model, but also when we're creating the model, when we're collecting the data and implementing the model. Everyone has their own subtle biases ingrained into them that they're raised with, and it's pretty much impossible to remove them from someone. But having a diverse group of, example, people coding can be one method to help reduce this. So let's say another example towards this aspect is, let's say you're hiring people to help develop a certain model for your project. You have this mindset that maybe people that come from prestigious schools or hold PhDs are the only ones or are the ones that are best qualified for this. However, you're showing prejudice against others and overlooking everyone else that may have more redeeming qualities and experiences, but based off of your experience and beliefs, you're not providing an open mindset to everyone. So as you can see, there's so many different ways of how bias can occur, and this can be talked about for hours. But now that I've kind of touched upon it and given some examples on where it may appear and how it can appear, I want to move on to more of the purpose of this project and the purpose of even thinking about this when working with AI. So the purpose of not only using voice with AI, but data from different topics to AI is because it has so much potential. As we can see, our voice here from an article, we can see our voice can help reveal if we have heart problems. It can serve as a biomarker. Again, our voice, this specifically to the Bridge of AI project, but there's also other ways it can aid within healthcare and outside of healthcare. For example, COVID-19, very important. Drugs, digital manufacturing, forecasting human diseases, or even predicting the progression of diseases. However, with these amazing articles and headlines that we see from universities and hospitals using AI more and more towards their advantage, there are downsides and articles that show the other side of it. For example, In an article published by Harvard Business Review, we see the shocking title of Why AI Failed to Live Up to Its Potential During the Pandemic. So this article has 4 main things that it talks about that caused this fail it mentions. It's bad data sets, automated discrimination, human error, and complex and uneven global context. So these are all important things to consider when working with AI. And again, we see more articles like this, biases in AI within healthcare, more biases, and even more biases. It's always one of the top reasons that a model is not as accurate as we hope. Now that I've given like some more real life examples to show the research and thought that's being put into this issue and how it's being thought about with the Bridge to AI project, I want us to pull back into Bridge to AI specifically and its mission overall across the US and OHSU's specific side to it. So the main mission, there's a couple of main goals of the project, but these are the main ones I kind of pulled from slides and content that we have. It's essentially to create ethical and trustworthy data sets that are easily accessible to users, but also not only easily accessible, but also develop guidelines around voice AI research, including data sharing, privacy, ownership, etc., to help facilitate data access and delivery in a secure manner that leaves all users safe and protected. So it's our mission to provide easily accessible data, but make sure it's safe. Along with this, more on the OHSU side, where it's our mission to provide resources and training materials to healthcare providers and people who will be using this data to help understand the importance of having fair and ethical data sets. So overall, our goal is to provide these data sets to help in future research and implementation of AI within healthcare, but also setting guidelines and creating materials that guide in safe and protected work. So because the mission of Bridge to AI as a whole is to provide data to people openly and securely, an aspect of it is education and outreach to the people that will be utilizing the data, working with AI, and then also the patients too that will be giving away their data to people to use. So like I mentioned, since OHSU's side to it is education, outreach to everyone that will be involved in this project, is an aspect to this that I worked on with Christy Jackson is a video consent where our goal is to create a video that will help educate and inform patients and potential patients. So we created an outline and highlighted main points that we would think would be important for a video consent, but then also help kind of alleviate people's fears and reduce some of the skepticism people have. So having this in a easier and understandable format for patients and potential patients can help kind of guide them and serve as a bridge to ensure that they're not as fearful, but we're also reaching out to different communities to educate them, and outreach is a big aspect, outreach. So what's actually going to be in this video, some of the key points that we want to highlight are to make sure that we let the viewers know the risk of participating in this research and not keep it hidden, how their data will actually be used, how it'll be kept private, safe, and secure, and then also let them know about all the help and benefits that their data will be able to aid with research and different projects. So this is just an example of one of the education materials that OHSU will work on to create and implement with to help with the collection of data for the Bridge to AI project. And this leads me to my final key takeaways for the entire internship as a whole, but then also the project, and then when thinking about working within AI and just data science in general. The 3 main things I've learned is awareness, education, and outreach. These seem kind of cliche, but they're also really important when working with healthcare data to help potentially reduce bias, reduce the fear, and help be inclusive with this technology from start to finish. So although I wasn't able to be as hands-on and work on the project I was brought on for due to reasons that were outside of our control, I was definitely able to learn a lot about the risks that come with working with AI that many developers overlook, and understand the different aspects to it and different steps that can be taken to help reduce the amount of biases that come when working with AI. So being even aware, like listening to this presentation, you're aware of these biases that can arise that you may have and are outside of your control, but having the sense of awareness that this can arise and that there are ways to help reduce the amount of bias there is the first step in the right direction. And then continuing to educate and reach out to people is also really crucial, and not just assuming that everyone knows that there's biases and that we just have to deal with them, but also understanding that there are ways to help reduce the amount of bias that is present in a model, and just to be aware. Again, awareness is a huge thing about the biases that can arise. So this leads me to my end of my presentation. I want to say thank you specifically to Dr. David Dorr, MJ Dunn, Chrissy Jackson, and the rest of the CMP team. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Reem. Questions for Reem? Clapping. Yay. Well, Reem, we've really enjoyed having you. Oh, Kate, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, Reem. And actually, Suzanne, you did a fabulous job. Reem, I was wondering, in your work with AI, or looking at it and looking at biases, was there particular situations that you would like to, like problems that you would like to go ahead and do some more research on, particularly like AI for the patient or AI for the researcher? Was there something in what you saw that you would like to work more on?
I think something that would definitely be super interesting to look more into is kind of how people handle when they have biases in data, and how can they even like flag it down. Let's say, for example, you see that example I gave with the European descent being more prominent. How, because it takes a lot of money and effort to even gather that data in the first place. It would be definitely super interesting to help aid in the process from the beginning, to ensure that that we're thinking about all aspects. We're not just trying to think of this certain community, but also this community. We want to kind of be as inclusive as possible. So because it's it's cost so much and it takes a lot of effort to even get that data in the first place, it would definitely be interesting to do more research on before that even happens, to help reduce that as much as possible, from, like I said, hiring different backgrounds, people from different backgrounds, because we all have different mindsets and we think differently. So having a diverse group in the first place that's working on it is kind of one step in the right direction, because you all bounce ideas off of each other. We have different opposing ideas, but we're kind of getting as much as we can within that group in the first place. So, yeah,
No, I think that's one way to look at it too, because there's not enough diversity on what who people are helping with and stuff like that to do the research on that. But that sounds great. So again, thank you for your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you for your question.
Hey, Reem, this is Aaron Cohen. I have a comment more than a question. Is that okay?
No worries. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what you're talking about is really important, and there's a bit of a divide between the people that are building these models and the people that are maybe identifying and characterizing these issues. I think there's really room for sort of best practice guidance in this field, like both when you're designing a project to build these models, but also after you've built the model, with the limitations, and making it clear what those limitations are and who they apply to. And so I think there's a lot of room, if you're interested, for sort of teasing out and describing in some published and easily followable referenced way best practices for the construction and application of machine learning and AI models in medicine and healthcare. I mean, I do a little of what you're talking about now as I've become aware of it. Like, just for example, just looking at looking at how well calibrated the models are in different subsets of people with different groups and stuff like that. And, especially at OHSU, when we're using OHSU data, there's just groups that are so far underrepresented that the model really shouldn't be used on those groups of people and shouldn't, it doesn't really have anything useful to say on groups of people other than who it was trained on, and that has to be one of the big sort of published caveats and limitations of the model. One would hope that that would then spur other people or to build similarly useful models with appropriate data for other groups of people, or and I know that N3C has tried to go in this direction, assemble data that is more representative so that you can actually build models on that are, useful and relevant and not misleading to other wider groups of people. But I think as long as we're dealing with localized data sources, we're probably going to have to admit our limitations, that the models that we're building really apply to populations that look like that population and not others. And I suppose the best you can do, and this is where best practices would come off, but from my experience, the best that I know how to do is just to study that and point it out. It's like, the calibration of this model on, non-white people is just not good and not useful and shouldn't be applied to that, and there needs to be future work that incorporates a greater diversity of data and people in this whatever the particular AI question is.
Yeah, thanks for your comment. I definitely agree. See, like you mentioned the word aware, you're aware. That's kind of one of the things I focused on. And definitely with, like you mentioned, like having these standards, and it's definitely hard to have, but it would be great if we could have those, but it's hard to get everyone, on board. Everyone has these mindsets, but like also like you said, when you have these models that are calibrated to, like you look at their calibration and whatnot, it's like some people don't even mention that it's skewed, but if you mention that like it's geared towards this population, that's fine because you're not using that against a different population that's not for that model.
Right.
If that makes any sense. So
it does. I'll say it is a certain kind of bias that, we're doing this work and creating this model, and it's really only helpful for certain groups of people because of our data limitations, and it would be better if, that led to broader models or repeated work that would cover broader sets of people. It's not really a good endpoint to have the best models you have are sort of biased and limited, and you can only use them on these people and not on others. So I think that some way of continuing to point out that it's like, in my mind, it's acceptable to point out the limitations, but that shouldn't be the permanent end state.
Oh yeah, definitely not. We want to be able, because in healthcare, we want to help our entire population, and especially those that come from a minority background, because they are the ones that have been underrepresented. So I think hopefully in the next couple of years, we're like talking about this right now, like I'm aware of it. I attended the symposium. The entire symposium was about health equity. So just kind of just stepping in this direction and just talking about it, continuously talking about it. Who knows, maybe in the future I'll dive more deeper into this and create some publication. It's definitely something I'm passionate about, especially within the field of data science, especially because AI is growing and it's becoming more and more powerful. So that's something I'm hoping to pursue. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Well, this was a great series of presentations. Thank you. Not that I'm biased, but and appreciate the interaction. Suzanne and Reem, we wish you the very best. Do stay in touch. We will be thinking about you, and hopefully we'll be able to hear great things from you in the future. Lynn, are we on for next week?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Are there more?
There'll be a second day. Yeah, there'll be a second day. I'll get the announcement out today.
Great. So look forward to more intern presentations next week. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.